Welcome back to Failed Oscar Bait. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, and I'm a blind film critic. This is the Supremes at Earl's All-You-Can-Eat Diner. This is Earl's All-You-Can-Eat. I actually don't even think the word diner is there. I am so sorry. I don't know. It has an impossibly long title for no apparent reason whatsoever. It's available now on Hulu because Fox Searchlight abandoned it and decided not to give it an Oscar campaign. So they sent it straight to Hulu to die. Uh, it does have audio description done by Descriptive Video Works, and the narrator was David something. I really want to know his name, and I want to say, give this dude more stuff to do because I really liked his voice. I feel like I've never heard him before, but I really like the narrator's voice. I think he feels like the guy that can confuse people into thinking it's John Bradley, but it's not John Bradley. So yeah, I would say this guy, put heavy rotation, throw him into heavy. I advocate for this narrator being put into heavy rotation. I really liked him, and I don't think I've heard anything else that he's done. So whatever else he's doing, he needs to do more. I'm a blind film critic, so I'm wearing a purple hat backwards and black sunglasses, and I'm wearing a Ren and Stimpy shirt. I've actually done a couple reviews with the shirt on, and I keep forgetting because it's faded, so I don't think anybody cares. So I'm not really like that. It was originally faded, but I've had this shirt since before I lost my vision, so I'm thinking about like all the times I've washed it since then, and I'm like, it must have been like it was one of those shirts designed to be faded. Has nothing to do with the Supremes either. And this has nothing to do with the Supremes, in case anybody was like thinking. I think that's why they put that in there. I know that they will never cop to that, but they're like, oh, if we say the Supremes, they'll think that it's about the Supremes, like Diana Ross and the Supremes. It's not. It's not. It's just a random group of Black women who are called the Supremes. But they're not the Supremes. They do go to a place called Earl's All You Can Eat. That is a thing, a real place in the movie. I wouldn't say that they go there enough where it's like, oh my God, of course, this is why we named the movie that. This is not like a Mystic Pizza situation, but it's in the movie a couple times. They go there. You know how like sometimes people like they have a restaurant that they go to and they're like, every Sunday we have a meal. And we have a meal at this place. Cool. Well, let's name your movie after that. So it'd be like naming your film Our Grandmothers at Denny's. So basically it's the same thing. So this film comes in hot with a lot of explanation about how these three characters came into the world, later played by three wonderful actresses. We have Aunjuane Ellis Taylor, Sanaa Latham, and Aduba, which are like the three reasons to watch this film, by the way. They have younger versions of themselves, like teenage versions, who are played by three actresses I'm not familiar with, and I can't remember their names. And there are some guys in this film that pop up as sort of their like male counterparts. Mekhi Phifer's in here, Vondi Curtis Hall, Julian McMahon. I don't know why, but Julian McMahon was in this. I was like, oh, he left the FBI franchise to do this. Cool. I wonder if he regrets it. There's a lot of emphasis on how each one of these kids came into the world, and there's a lot of world building at the very beginning. Like, who are these girls? How do they know each other? How does this story start? And then once we get into it, and then we flash forward, and it's like the older versions of themselves, and we flash back sometimes. And it's like the story is trying to put things together, but what it feels like is that this was a book and somebody was told to adapt it. And they were like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. So they wrote an adaptation, and then somebody filmed that adaptation. So it's already like a truncated version of the original story. And then the studio came along and was like, oof, a 2 hour, 45-minute movie, nobody's going to watch that. We're going to need you to cut from this film, which makes it even more unintelligible. There were things that just kind of happened in this film. It just kind of seemed like people were like, oh yeah, this is where we're at in our life. Connections to characters that were supposed to have an image, like a ton of emotional weight behind them, just didn't, because we didn't spend any time with these characters. When you're trying to do this like generational thing where like we see these kids, we see them as not really kids, but like teenagers. And then they grow up to be these adults, and they're trying to pull off like a back in the day, like Waiting to Exhale type of thing. It doesn't really even feel like that. Like, it doesn't really feel like I've spent enough time with any of these characters in any of their situations specifically. They just kind of announce that things are the way that they are. And you're like, but how did we get here? And I always felt like I missed a scene. Like there's a deleted scene that I should have had. And it's not because of, like, the audio description is fine. I think the audio description really tries to do the most that it can with the given, with any of the given product that it's being given. Lots of good like looks back and forth at each other. Like people just give each other like the stare at the right time, you know. And the acting is great, you know. I mean, it's like, but it kind of feels like this was like a 3-hour movie that they chopped to like maybe 2 hours. I don't know how long this movie is. And then it's so disconnected, like scene to scene to scene to scene. And then, so this is a little bit of a spoiler warning. So like one of them gets cancer. So it feels like we have to rush to that so that they can then spend time with that. So we spend a lot of time with them in their youth before we ever show them as adults. And then we do this thing where we kind of like fast forward through their adult years and their relationships and the men in their lives. And like, how did they get these men? Oh, they have children. What's up with the children? They have relationships? Who are these children? You know, I mean, just like the whole second act of this film just didn't work for me, because on top of that, they were also trying to flash back to give hopefully some context, but they didn't give enough context. This is something that probably should have been a mini series, like a limited series on television, if they really wanted to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Or, you know, maybe don't get so invested in weird details. You know, it's like, I felt like really cool at the beginning of the film. It felt like, oh yeah, so they came into the world like this really interesting way. But then you're like, man, they used a lot of time to tell that story. And then like later on, you're sitting there going, who is that? Oh, it's her husband. How did they meet? Where did he come from? You know, how are they in this relationship? A lot of those things come with time, and they're earned because we see people connect and then fall in love. And, or if you have people who are in like a dysfunctional relationship, you want to know what it was like before that. You know, like, how did we get to this? And then how did we fall out of this? Waiting to Exhale is probably the greatest comp that I can make to that. And it does do a little bit better job of showing you that. Even that, Waiting to Exhale is not like my favorite movie of all time, but it does do a little bit better job. Also, I'm thinking about stuff like Steel Magnolias manages a female-led cast with like some guys and bouncing story to story, and one of the characters in that contracts, you know, has an illness and dies. So I mean, like, they manage everything in Steel Magnolias, and they managed to have characters that felt developed and a world that felt developed. You know, here I feel like I'm always missing something. Like, I'm always missing pieces of information from scenes before. And I'm just like, I don't know how we got here. And I'm not as invested in your relationship. Like, the guys here really take a back seat in terms of the story. Even, I would say Mekhi Phifer has probably the most to do, but even sort of like him being introduced felt kind of like, okay, you know? I mean, like, he's still not like a huge part of the story, but he could be, because I think his character dates all the way back to when they were younger. So I don't know. It's just about use of time and writing. And then I would not be surprised at all if the director of this film was like, yeah, I was told I had to cut the X amount of minutes from this film. And I would feel that, you know? And I think when you do that, and you have two ways that you could do things. So this was a film that was being floated for Oscar consideration. You know, that they were, this people saw this and listened, they were like, I don't know what to do this. Are we projecting it for anything? Like, it's Fox Searchlight is, you know, what are they doing with it? And so what I would say to Fox Searchlight is, if it was delivered at a longer cut, and that longer cut was better, and then you were just worried about runtime, and then so that person cuts and delivers to you, and then suddenly you don't like the film anymore, well, that's on you, because you told them to cut the film. We we can watch longer films, especially during Oscar season. We are actually sort of almost programmed to watch longer films. Oscar season is the great time to release like a 3-hour film. I'm not advocating and saying that this should be 3 hours, but it should be longer, because I can't figure out, you know, we have to be able to land these emotional impact connections. I need to be able to feel for these characters and understand who they are. And when they reference a character and they're like, "Oh, my son," and it's like, who, what? You know, I mean, I didn't get to see your son grow up. You know, I didn't get to see the little kid grow up and to be, you know, like passage of time is so important in films like this, where you get to see people, because it helps build connections. And this whole film is supposed to be about this connection that these three women have, so much so that they like meet they stay best friends from their whole lives, right? They meet when they're young and they're just like three peas in a pod. I know it's two, but it's, for this it's going to be three. Okay. So, that's the vibe, but it doesn't deliver on it, because it can't, because it's so jerky and it just chops. And but damn it, these actresses are fantastic. So I'm not giving this a negative. I'm not going to go full negative on this, because like, I'm somebody who likes to show up for actors anyway. Like, I love a great performance. Even when I could see, I love a great performance. Even in like a mediocre film, a great performance can kind of push it up for me a little bit. There are plenty of films where I'm like, I don't really like the film, but damn, so-and-so was great in that. Like, there are films that I don't even think are very good, but have like a really, like, one great performance in it. And I'm like, oh yeah. An example of how picky I get is, I'll say, does anybody remember like Dear John with Channing Tatum and Amanda Seyfried? I thought that film was kind of like garbage, but Richard Jenkins is really good in that, and it's like one of those performances nobody ever talks about, but he's really good in it. So if you're trying to study acting, you're trying to study a craft, and you're trying to look at things and go, okay, so who are the masters here? And you see somebody like Richard Jenkins, who's sort of a character actor, just sort of known for drifting in and out of those kind of roles. And he's doing this work, this very sort of quiet work in this film that's not very good. It shows you how good somebody can be when given virtually nothing. And here I would say that's the same thing. Like, I think Aunjuane Ellis Taylor, Sanaa Latham, and Aduba are all fantastic. But I don't conceptually understand their characters. But when they're reading their dialogue and they're interacting, it's glorious. And it's like, good on you for being able to find a character where there is none. You know, for being able to bring something out where maybe the writers fell short. I think largely, I'm going to say the problem here is either the script was bad from the beginning, which I want to be optimistic and say we didn't make this movie and that these actresses didn't sign on to this crappy of a screenplay. I'm going to say that they've made cuts. along the way. I'm going to say that this is what happens when you overly edit a film. You get this, and then you get pulled out of Oscar consideration and sent to Hulu. So, but generally it's a studio that's asking for the cut. So I just wish Fox Searchlight, instead of being like, oh, we're going to send it to Hulu, had just been like, yeah, we're going to push it back a year, but we're going to put the scenes back in because the original cut was better, you know? Or was the original cut still terrible? Like, is this just an impossible film to have ever tackled? In which case, then it would be the screenwriter. Because, anyway, it's kind of a rabbit hole when you get into it. I love the narrator, audio description narrator for this. And the audio description I thought was very good. I didn't have... The film itself is inherently confusing because things were happening, but they didn't happen with too much context. So I'm thinking about the audio description in terms of character description, situational description. Not so much did it help me follow the film, because I don't think that's possible here. I don't think that I'm not gonna, I shouldn't put that weight on the audio description, because literally characters were just like, I'm here, and I'm like, I don't know who you are. What? I kind of felt that a lot. I felt like I barely knew who people were, and like, but they were suddenly supposed to be this like huge part of the thing. And I'm like, I know we're time jumping here, but Jesus. So yeah, I think the audio description track is fine. It's recorded well. They obviously professionally did a solid job here, because at one point this was intended for theatrical release. So they didn't, they picked somebody who they thought would translate to theaters. And I really like the narrator, and I hope to hear more from them in the future. And I wish I remembered his last name, but if he does more stuff, I will. That's the thing. It'll be easier for me to remember his name, because I start off with these things and then I have to remember all the names of all the actors in the film, and then I have to remember all the names of everybody else, and then the narrator, and it's just like, yeah, let's get him more things so that he becomes sort of ubiquitous. Like when I hear Laura Post, I'm just, oh, it's Laura Post. I'll remember that. I've literally like not written that down and gone to sleep and then woke up and been like, oh yeah, it was Laura Post. So it's just, let's make this dude like a ubiquitous name. I fully advocate for that. He should at least be on John Bradley's level, if not. So I'm advocating for this dude to get more work. It's weird. Like, the greatest thing that came out of Supremes. Actually, that's not fair, because I really do want to say Aunjuane, Ellis, Sanaa, Latham, and Aduba are fantastic here. And actually, I don't know the names of the 3 girls who play the younger counterparts of them, but they're actually really pretty good. And Mekhi Phifer is given some heavier material to deal with, and he does a really nice job. So there's stuff here. But it's all in the acting. It's all just really good actors handling their material really well. Because the stuff that's actually there is not. There's nothing. They didn't give them anything to do. It's like reading sides, but then like your actors are like, and they don't have the context of what they're doing, but like a really good actor just picks up a side in an audition and they just floor you. And like, somehow they've created this whole character inside their head, and it just worked for you. And you're like, I don't know where this is coming from or where this is going, but I'm invested. I felt like that, but I felt like that throughout the whole movie. I was like, I don't know where we are. I don't understand this, but my God, Aunjuane, or my God, Sanaa Latham, that was one hell of a monologue, there's times in here I was just like, damn. So I could make some argument for this getting acting nominations, absolutely, but I just don't think anybody's going to sit through this and then come out of on the other end and be like, awards. I think very few people are like me, where they're able to finish a film like this and then still go, but the performances. So it's a mess of a film. I totally understand why Fox Searchlight abandoned it if they felt like they really couldn't fix it. So I'm gonna give the Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat a C+. Sorry. I actually was looking forward to this. And then I also thought it was about the actual Supremes. So I think I kind of like it immediately, as soon as I realized it wasn't about the actual Supremes, I think it immediately lost its top potential. Like, it went from A to A-, because I felt like I was being baited. So that's something to think about too. is I think you're baiting people into thinking it is about the original, like the actual Supremes. And I know you're like, well, I think it'd be the Supremes. I can hear somebody saying that. And it's like, come on. But you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. So don't look at me like that. When you put the Supremes in the title, you know what you're hoping for. You know, if we had the Beatles at Joe's dive bar, you're going to think it's the Beatles at a place called Joe's Dive Bar. Not just like a group of dudes who hang out and they call themselves the Beatles. That's what this film is. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you guys on the other side.